The sound of glass meeting wood echoed through Murphy's Tavern like a gunshot at dawn. Thursday night, 21:30 hours, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The kind of night where mistakes got made and memories got buried under cheap bourbon and cheaper decisions. Sarah Kincaid didn't look up from her book. The advanced field manual lay open before her on the scarred wooden table, its pages dense with diagrams of suppressive fire tactics in mountainous terrain. Her finger traced a line of text describing overlapping fields of fire, the kind of knowledge that separated professionals from corpses. The logistics core patch on her BDU caught the dim light from the neon beer signs, marking her as supply, as someone who counted bullets instead of firing them. She was 28 years old and invisible. 4 Rangers pushed through the tavern door like a storm front rolling in from the Tennessee hills. Staff Sergeant Tyler Brennan led the way, 6'1" of muscle and Bronze Star confidence, his uniform still carrying the dust of 18 months in Kandahar. Behind him came Specialist Derek Stone, the marksman with an expert badge that he wore like a crown. Then Corporal Marcus Webb, Purple Heart from an IED that had painted the Afghan sand red. Finally, Private First Class Liam Cross, 23, and fresh enough from Ranger School that he still believed the world made sense. They owned the room the moment they entered. The other patrons, maybe 20 soldiers nursing their Thursday blues, turned to watch. These were the 75th Regiment, the cream of the infantry crop, the men who kicked doors and broke enemies. When they celebrated, everyone noticed. When they laughed, the sound carried weight. Tyler's eyes found Sarah in her corner booth. "Hey!" His voice cut through the country music bleeding from the ancient jukebox. "Warehouse girl." Sarah's finger continued its steady path across the page. She had learned long ago that the first response determined everything. React too quickly and you showed fear. React too slowly and you showed disrespect. The sweet spot was right in the middle, that perfect zone of polite indifference. She finished the paragraph before looking up. Her eyes met Tyler's stare with the kind of calm that came from seeing things most people only had nightmares about. No emotion, no challenge, just the flat assessment of someone who had measured threats in 100 different ways and found this one wanting. "Can I help you, Sergeant?" Tyler moved closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The smell of celebration rolled off him in waves, that particular mix of beer and brotherhood that made men brave and stupid in equal measure. "I'm just curious what a supply clerk is doing reading infantry tactics." "You lost?" Derek laughed from the bar. "Maybe she thinks she's gonna deploy." Marcus added his voice, darker, edged with something mean. "Supply doesn't deploy. Supply sits safe while real soldiers do real work." Sarah closed the manual with precise movements, each edge aligned perfectly with the table's grain, a habit born from 6 years of living 2 lives. "The manual is available to all soldiers, Sergeant Brennan. I'm exercising my right to professional development." The use of his name created a ripple of silence. Tyler's eyes narrowed. "How do you know my name?" "I know all your names." Sarah's voice remained quiet, the kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear. "Staff Sergeant Tyler Brennan, 2 Bronze Stars, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. You returned from Kandahar 3 days ago after an 18-month deployment. You were assigned to FOB Scorpion, primarily convoy security and quick reaction force duties." The tavern had gone completely still. Tyler's jaw tightened. "You been stalking me, Supply?" "I read the deployment rosters. It's my job to know which units need which equipment when they return." Sarah's finger traced the edge of her beer glass, condensation leaving a trail on the wood. "Specialist Derek Stone, expert marksman badge, 3 deployments, 12 confirmed kills according to the unofficial count. Corporal Marcus Webb, Purple Heart recipient, injured by IED in Kandahar province, 14 months medical recovery. Private First Class Liam Cross graduated Ranger School 7 weeks ago, still has the Fort Benning red clay under his fingernails." The accuracy hit like physical blows. Derek straightened from his casual lean against the bar. Marcus shifted his weight, unconsciously checking the hip where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone. Liam's hand went to his pocket, where he probably still carried his Ranger tab like a talisman. Frank Murphy, the bartender, watched from behind his counter with the patient eyes of a man who had seen this movie before. At 72, with a Korean War Purple Heart collecting dust in a drawer somewhere, he recognized the signs. The tension that preceded either violence or wisdom. The moment when young men decided what kind of soldiers they wanted to be. Tyler leaned both hands on Sarah's table. "Knowing names and numbers doesn't make you a soldier. You ever been in a firefight? You ever calculated bullet drop while someone was actively trying to kill you?" "No, Sergeant, I have not." "Then what makes you think you understand tactics?" Sarah picked up her beer, took a measured sip, set it down in exactly the same spot. The wet ring matched perfectly. I never claimed to understand tactics better than you. I claimed I was reading a manual. Those are different things. Sounds like attitude to me. Marcus moved closer, his bulk blocking the path to the exit. Sounds like a supply clerk who thinks she's special because she can memorize rosters. Sarah's gaze flicked to something behind them, a micro movement so fast most people missed it. Then back to Tyler. I think I'm a specialist doing her job. What you think about that is your concern, not mine. The confrontation was drawing attention now. Conversations died. Phone cameras came out. Everyone sensed something worth witnessing was about to unfold. The kind of moment that became story, that got retold in different bars to different soldiers until the details blurred, but the lesson remained. Liam, the youngest, decided to prove himself. He reached out and deliberately knocked Sarah's field manual onto the floor. The pages fluttered like broken wings, landing face down on the sticky wooden planks. Oops. His mock innocence was theater quality. Guess you'll have to reorganize those pages now. That's what you're good at, right? Organizing things? Sarah didn't immediately move to retrieve the book. Instead, she studied each of the four men with the kind of methodical assessment that should have triggered alarm bells in anyone with actual combat experience. Tyler stood at her 12 o'clock, the obvious alpha, chest puffed with 18 months of survival and success. Derek held her 3 o'clock, trying to look casual but positioned to block escape toward the bar. Marcus covered 9 o'clock. His weight shifted forward in a way that telegraphed aggression 3 seconds before action. And Liam, the least experienced, had foolishly positioned himself at 6 o'clock directly behind her. The worst possible tactical position if she was actually dangerous. The smell of spilled beer hit her senses like a trigger. That particular sour sweetness of wasted alcohol and wasted opportunities. Her mind flashed to another bar, another group of men, another test she had passed by staying silent. The memory lasted less than 2 seconds, a ghost of sensation that disappeared as quickly as it came. She bent down to retrieve the manual. The movement was fluid, economical, the kind of grace that came from years of training the body to move like water. When she straightened, she kept the book in her left hand while her right remained free. Another detail that went unnoticed by the increasingly drunk Rangers. Thank you for the reminder about organization, Private Cross. Sarah set the manual on the table, still not rising from her seat. Though I should point out that Ranger School teaches you to maintain awareness of all threats in a 360-degree radius. You're currently standing directly behind me within arm's reach with your weight on your forward foot. If I were hostile, you'd be unconscious before you registered movement. Liam flushed red. You threatening me? No, I'm teaching you. There's a difference. Tyler's hand slammed down on the table. You don't get to teach Rangers anything, Supply. Sarah looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much. Then perhaps you should stop providing teachable moments, Sergeant. The tavern held its breath. Derek tried to regain control of the situation. He grabbed a napkin from a nearby table and sketched quickly, drawing what was supposed to be a rifle configuration. You're such an expert from all your reading. Tell me what's wrong with this weapon setup. Sarah glanced at the crude drawing for exactly 3 seconds. 7 things. The barrel length is incompatible with that stock configuration. The scope mounting position would interfere with the charging handle operation. The trigger assembly is positioned too far forward for standard hand placement. The magazine well angle is wrong for that lower receiver. The forward assist is on the wrong side for right-handed operation. The ejection port would send brass casings directly into the operator's face. And you've drawn a left-handed weapon system with right-handed controls. Silence. Derek stared at his drawing like it had personally betrayed him. Sarah continued in that same quiet voice. Would you like me to correct it? Or should we pretend this was a test you meant to fail? Marcus's face flushed purple. Anyone can memorize specs. Let's see you answer something that's not in your books. What's the bullet drop on a .338 Lapua Magnum at 800 yards with a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind at 45 degrees? Assuming sea level, standard atmospheric pressure, and a 200-grain bullet with a muzzle velocity of 3,000 feet per second, you're looking at approximately 93 inches of drop and 17 inches of wind drift. Sarah's response came without hesitation. But at Fort Campbell's elevation of 550 feet with typical humidity for November, it's closer to 91 inches drop and 16 inches drift. Of course, that assumes you can maintain consistent shooting position, which based on your current stance seems unlikely. The air in Murphy's Tavern had shifted from mockery to something more dangerous. Tyler's jaw clenched so hard his teeth should have shattered. Around them, other patrons had stopped pretending not to watch. Several had phones out, sensing something worth recording was about to happen. This was the moment before, the pause between lightning and thunder. You memorize ballistics tables. Derek's voice carried less certainty than before. That doesn't mean you understand what they mean in real-world application. Sarah stood slowly. At 5'5", she had to tilt her head back to meet Tyler's eyes, but something in her posture made the size difference seem irrelevant. You want to test me on something Google can't help with? Fine. Specialist Stone has been favoring his left shoulder for the past 10 minutes. Rotator cuff injury, probably from improper form during physical training. The micro adjustments in your stance compensate, but they'll cost you zero point 0.3 seconds on target acquisition. Corporal Webb has been unconsciously checking his right hip every time he shifts weight. Old injury acting up, likely shrapnel fragments based on the movement pattern and the weather change tonight. Private Cross has hand tremors from dehydration and excessive caffeine intake, which means his accuracy on the range tomorrow will be compromised by at least 15%. And you, Sergeant Brennan, have been standing in a modified isosceles stance since you approached my table, which indicates you're carrying concealed at 4 o'clock position, probably a Glock 19 based on the printing pattern under your shirt. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's hand involuntarily twitched toward his concealed carry position, confirming every word. Around them, the bar patrons leaned in closer, phones recording everything. The moment had crystallized into something more than drunk soldiers harassing a supply clerk. It had become a lesson, though the students hadn't figured that out yet. How? Liam started to ask, but Sarah cut him off. Observation and deduction, skills that matter more than muscle mass in actual combat situations. She picked up her manual and tucked it under her arm. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have early morning inventory to prepare for. Tyler stepped directly into her path, his bulk blocking the exit. We're not done here. Nobody embarrasses my team and walks away. You think reading books makes you special? You're nothing but a pug trying to act tough. Sarah's gaze flickered to something over Tyler's shoulder, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. POG, person other than grunt. Interesting that you'd use that term for someone whose actual military occupational specialty you don't know. Your MOS is supply, Derek interjected. Says so right on your uniform. No, Sarah corrected quietly. My cover assignment is supply. There's a significant difference, but understanding that would require security clearance you don't have. Marcus laughed, ugly and harsh. Security clearance? You're delusional. What are you, some kind of secret agent? This isn't a movie, sweetheart. You're a warehouse clerk with delusions of grandeur. The conversation had drawn the attention of everyone in the bar now, including someone the Rangers hadn't noticed entering 5 minutes earlier. Colonel Vincent Davis stood near the entrance in civilian clothes, a ball cap pulled low over his eyes, watching the confrontation with increasing interest. He pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly, his expression growing more concerned with each passing second. Tyler grabbed Sarah's wrist as she tried to move past him, his grip tight enough to leave marks. I said we're not done. Sarah looked down at where his hand gripped her arm, then back up at his face. When she spoke, her voice had dropped an octave, carrying a warning that Tyler was too drunk and too proud to heed. Sergeant Brennan, you are currently in violation of Article 128 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, assault and battery. I strongly suggest you release my arm before this escalates beyond your ability to control. You memorized the UCMJ2? Tyler mocked, tightening his grip. What are you going to do, file a complaint with Supply Command? Liam, emboldened by alcohol and peer pressure, picked up Sarah's beer and deliberately poured it over her field manual. The amber liquid soaked into the pages, destroying hours of careful study with casual cruelty. Oops, again. Guess you'll need to requisition a new manual. That's definitely in your skill set. The crowd gasped at the deliberate destruction. Frank Murphy started forward from behind the bar, but stopped when he noticed Colonel Davis holding up a hand in a subtle wait gesture. The colonel's eyes were fixed on Sarah, watching for her reaction with the intensity of a man conducting an experiment. Sarah remained perfectly still for 3 long seconds, watching the beer soak into the tactical manual she had paid for with her own money. When she finally moved, it was only to carefully set the ruined book on the nearest table, her movements precise and controlled. That manual cost $87. Her voice remained quiet. I'll expect reimbursement. Oh, you'll expect reimbursement? Marcus mocked in a high-pitched voice. What if we don't feel like paying? You gonna take us to small claims court? Henry Walsh, a 73-year-old Korean War veteran sitting in the corner, spoke up for the first time. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen real war and recognized its shape in unlikely places. There's something not right about this girl. Look at her eyes. Those aren't the eyes of someone who counts boxes for a living. Tyler heard the comment and laughed, still gripping Sarah's wrist. What? You think she's dangerous, old-timer? This little thing? He released her arm and stepped back, spreading his arms wide in a mock fighting stance. Come on then, supply clerk. Show us what all that book learning taught you about combat. Sarah rubbed her wrist where Tyler had gripped it, the motion revealing the edge of what looked like an old scar, a thin white line against her skin. I don't engage in pointless violence, Sergeant. It's unprofessional and counterproductive. Counterproductive, Derek repeated mockingly. Everything's a regulation or a statistic with you, isn't it? No wonder you're stuck in supply. No instinct, no fire, no warrior spirit. Warrior spirit. Sarah repeated the words like she was tasting something bitter. Interesting concept. Tell me, Specialist Stone, how many confirmed kills do you have? Derek's chest puffed out with pride. 12 confirmed, maybe 20 probable. 12. Respectable for 3 deployments. Sarah nodded slowly. And you've been in how many firefights where you were outnumbered more than 10 to 1? What does that have to do with anything? Marcus interjected, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Just establishing context, because warrior spirit, as you call it, isn't about starting fights in bars with people you perceive as weaker. It's about maintaining absolute calm when 300 enemy combatants are trying to overrun your position and you're down to your last magazine. Liam scoffed. And you'd know about that from your extensive combat experience in the supply depot. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at each of the 4 Rangers in turn, her expression holding something they couldn't quite identify, something old and tired and infinitely patient. Hypothetically, she said finally, if someone had been in that situation, they probably wouldn't talk about it in a bar. They probably wouldn't need to prove themselves to anyone. They'd probably just sit quietly, study their manuals, and let insecure people make assumptions. Colonel Davis had seen enough. He moved through the crowd with the kind of authority that made people step aside without thinking about it. Even in civilian clothes, something about his bearing screamed senior officer, the kind of command presence that came from decades of leading men into dark places. He positioned himself where he could see both Sarah and the 4 Rangers. Specialist Kincaid, his voice cut through the tension like a blade. You're needed. The room froze. Tyler turned to face the newcomer, recognition dawning slowly through the beer haze. Sir, Colonel Davis? Sergeant Brennan. Davis's acknowledgement was curt, dismissive. His attention remained fixed on Sarah. Grab your gear, you have 20 minutes. Sarah's posture shifted subtly from passive to alert. Sir, what's the situation? I'll brief you in the vehicle. Move. Tyler stepped forward, alcohol making him brave and stupid. Sir, with all due respect, this woman has been deliberately provoking us. She's been making claims about security clearances and combat experience that, Sergeant, Davis's voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze nitrogen. I don't recall asking for your input. In fact, I don't recall you being part of this conversation at all. What I do recall is that you are currently off duty, clearly intoxicated, and harassing a fellow soldier. Would you like me to continue this discussion in an official capacity? Tyler's face went pale. No, sir. Then I suggest you return to your drinks and forget this conversation ever happened. Davis turned back to Sarah. Specialist, you have 19 minutes now. Sarah nodded once and walked toward the exit, moving past the 4 Rangers like they were furniture. Tyler's hand twitched like he wanted to stop her again, but Derek grabbed his arm and pulled him back. The look Colonel Davis gave them could have stripped paint. As Sarah reached the door, she paused and looked back at the 4 Rangers. For what it's worth, Sergeant Brennan, I hope your celebration is everything you earned. You survived 18 months in a combat zone. That's no small thing. But survival and understanding are different achievements. You might want to learn the difference before you judge people based on their job titles. Then she was gone, leaving behind a bar full of confused soldiers and 4 Rangers who were starting to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. Frank Murphy began cleaning glasses with methodical precision, the kind of busy work that gave him an excuse to observe without seeming to. Henry Walsh raised his beer toward the empty doorway in a silent salute, a gesture of respect that made several of the younger soldiers uncomfortable without understanding why. Tyler stared at his beer like it held answers. What just happened? Derek shook his head slowly. I don't know, man, but I don't think she was lying about the security clearance. Marcus sat down heavily. A colonel doesn't personally retrieve supply clerks, not for any reason I can think of. Liam, the youngest, voiced what they were all thinking. Who the hell is Sarah Kincaid? Outside, Colonel Davis drove Sarah toward the classified briefing facility in silence for the first 3 minutes. The Kentucky night rolled past the windows, dark and cold. Finally, he spoke. That was reckless. I know, sir. You could have ended that confrontation in 30 seconds. Any one of a dozen ways. Yes, sir. But you chose to let them humiliate you, destroy your property, put hands on you. Davis glanced over, his expression unreadable. Why? Sarah looked out the window at the passing landscape. Because I needed to know what kind of men they were when they thought they were dealing with someone powerless. That tells you more about character than how they act when they know they're being watched. And what did you learn? That Sergeant Brennan is a good soldier who makes bad decisions when he's drunk and trying to impress his team. That Specialist Stone has tactical intelligence, but lacks emotional discipline. That Corporal Webb carries anger from his injury that makes him cruel. And that Private Cross is young enough to still be shaped, but old enough to be dangerous if he's shaped wrong. Davis pulled into the secured parking area of a nondescript building on the far side of Fort Campbell. The general is waiting. This is Code Red, Phantom 5. The use of her operational designation made Sarah's spine straighten. Code Red meant Americans in immediate danger. It meant the kind of situation where conventional assets had failed and unconventional solutions were required. It meant someone was about to die unless she could stop it. They entered through a side door, past security that knew better than to ask questions, down a corridor that didn't officially exist. The briefing room was small, windowless, dominated by a large screen showing the face of General Thomas Mitchell, 3 stars gleaming on his uniform even through the video compression. Phantom 5. The general's voice carried the weight of too many funerals and not enough victories. We have a situation in Helmand Province, 48 Rangers from 3rd Battalion, 75th Regiment. Sarah's stomach dropped. 3rd Battalion. Same unit as Tyler's brother. The general continued. They were on a routine patrol near Kajaki District. Intel said the area was clear. Intel was wrong. The patrol was ambushed 4 hours ago by approximately 200 Taliban fighters in prepared positions. It was a deliberate trap. The screen showed satellite imagery of a compound surrounded by hostile forces. Red dots marked enemy positions in a perfect killing circle. A small cluster of blue dots huddled in the center, growing smaller. Current status: 17 Rangers killed in action, 14 wounded in action, 48 still combat effective but surrounded. They've taken cover in a former police compound, but it's not fortified. 2 Apache helicopters were shot down attempting close air support. Nearest quick reaction force is 6 hours out due to weather conditions closing the forward operating bases. Sarah studied the tactical display with the intensity of someone reading a death warrant. What's their ammunition status? Estimated 15% remaining. They've been fighting for 4 hours straight. Enemy is massing for final assault at dawn. The general's face was carved from stone. Dawn is 90 minutes from now. Spotter availability? Master Sergeant Nathan Reeves is wheels up from Fort Bragg, but his ETA is 4 hours behind you due to aircraft availability. You'll be going in alone. Alone, 1 shooter, 200 plus hostiles, 48 American lives hanging in the balance. The math was simple and brutal. Understood, sir. What's my mission parameter? Delay the enemy. Keep those Rangers alive until the QRF can extract them, by any means necessary. The general leaned forward, his face filling the screen. Phantom 5, I'm not going to pretend this is anything but a suicide mission. The odds are impossible. If you want to decline, I'll understand. We'll find another solution. Sarah thought about 4 Rangers in a bar, drunk and cruel and human. She thought about the manual they had destroyed, the wrist that still ached from Tyler's grip, the casual dismissal of her worth as a soldier. Then she thought about 48 men who were about to die because someone's intelligence had failed them. I'll need immediate air transport to Bagram, full combat load, and authorization to engage at will. Already arranged. Your rifle is being prepped now. You'll be wheels up in 30 minutes. The general paused. Phantom 5, the Rangers you're going to save, they're good men. They deserve to come home. Yes, sir, they do. The screen went dark. Colonel Davis handed her a tablet with the full tactical briefing. Your gear is already at the airfield. I've arranged a helicopter to get you there. Sarah scrolled through the intelligence reports, memorizing terrain features, enemy positions, friendly locations. Her mind was already calculating angles, distances, wind patterns. The familiar cold clarity settled over her thoughts like armor. Sir, one question. Go ahead. The trapped Rangers, what's the name of their commanding officer? Davis checked his own tablet. Captain Jason Brennan. Why? The universe had a sense of humor, Sarah decided. A cruel, ironic sense of humor. Just curious, sir. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the Fort Campbell Armory's classified section, a place that didn't officially exist and held weapons that weren't officially there. Her custom Macmillan TAC-3 338 rifle lay on the prep table, already cleaned and zeroed to her exact specifications. The weapon was an extension of her will, 50 inches of precisely machined metal and composite that could deliver death at distances most people couldn't comprehend. 400 rounds of .338 Lapua Magnum ammunition sat in organized rows, each round capable of killing at ranges where most rifles couldn't even reach. Her ghillie suit hung ready, custom-tailored for Afghan terrain, designed to make her invisible against rock and sand. Thermal optics that turned night into day. Night vision that made darkness irrelevant. Communications gear encrypted beyond anything standard military used. The tools of her trade, the instruments of her invisible war. The armorer, a crusty warrant officer named Garcia, who had been doing this job since before Sarah was born, watched her gear up with professional detachment. He had prepped equipment for hundreds of operators heading into hundreds of missions. Most came back. Some didn't. He treated them all the same, because the gear didn't care about odds. Phantom 5, this is a suicide run. 200 hostiles, 1 shooter, no support. Sarah chambered a round into her rifle, checked the action with movements that had been drilled into muscle memory through 10,000 repetitions, verified the scope 0 against a laser calibration system that confirmed she was accurate to 0.1 millimeters of arc. 200 targets, 1 operator, sounds like Tuesday. She feels stripped the rifle with practiced efficiency, inspecting every component with the care of someone whose life depended on mechanical perfection. The bolt carrier group showed no wear. The firing pin spring had correct tension. The barrel was clean, no copper fouling, no carbon buildup. The scope's reticle was clear. The adjustments clicked with precision. The 0 was perfect. Sarah reassembled the weapon in 47 seconds flat, every movement economical, every action purposeful. This rifle had been with her through 23 previous missions. It had never failed her. She wouldn't fail it now. You got a death wish specialist? No, warrant officer, I've got a job. Garcia handed her the ammunition loadout, organized into magazines and loose rounds, each one inspected and certified. Those Rangers you're saving, they know what you're doing for them? They don't know anything about me. That's how it should be. Seems wrong, dying for people who'll never know your name. Sarah slung the rifle across her back, the weight familiar and comforting. They'll know someone saved them, that's enough. She walked toward the waiting helicopter, her boots making no sound on the concrete floor, despite the 70 pounds of gear she carried. Behind her, Garcia shook his head and muttered something about young soldiers and impossible odds. But his hands were already moving to prep equipment for the next operator, because the war never stopped, and neither did the work. The Black Hawk sat on the tarmac with rotors already spinning, the pilot visible in the cockpit running through final checks. Sarah climbed aboard, secured her gear, and settled into the uncomfortable canvas seat that had carried thousands of soldiers toward thousands of fates. The crew chief gave her a thumbs up. The helicopter lifted off, banking hard toward the airfield where a C-17 waited to carry her 8,000 miles toward a valley where 48 Americans were counting the minutes until dawn brought death. Meanwhile, back at the barracks, Tyler Brennan sat on his bunk, unable to sleep despite the alcohol and exhaustion. Something about the encounter with Sarah Kincaid gnawed at him like a splinter under the skin. The way she had moved, the knowledge she displayed, the casual precision of her observations. Supply clerks didn't move like that. Supply clerks didn't know ballistics tables by heart. Supply clerks didn't get personally retrieved by full colonels. Derek sat across from him, equally restless. You thinking what I'm thinking? That we just made a massive mistake? Tyler pulled out his phone. Yeah, what are you doing? Looking her up. Tyler pulled up the Fort Campbell personnel database, the low-clearance version that anyone with a CAC card could access. He typed in Sarah Kincaid's name. The file that came up showed basic information. Specialist, 6-year service, MOS 9, 2Y unit supply. Specialist, current assignment Fort Campbell Logistics Company, deployment history 0, commendations none listed. But at the bottom, in small text, a single line that made Tyler's blood run cold. Clearance level, classified Tier 1 access required. What the hell? Derek leaned over to look. Tier 1 clearance for a supply clerk? Marcus and Liam had wandered over, drawn by the tone of Tyler's voice. All 4 stared at the screen like it was written in a language they didn't understand. That's higher than our clearances, Marcus said quietly. That's special operations level. Tyler tried to access more details, but every link just brought up access denied in red letters. He tried different search terms, different databases, getting more desperate and more reckless with each failed attempt. Finally, a different database, one he technically wasn't supposed to be able to access, gave him a fragment of information before locking him out. Kincaid, S Specialist. Secondary assignment, Phantom Program. Details. Classified beyond current access level. Phantom Program. Derek repeated the words slowly. Anyone ever heard of that? 3 headshakes. Tyler's phone rang, making all 4 of them jump. Unknown number. He answered with a sense of dread that he couldn't explain. Sergeant Brennan? The voice was formal, professional, carried the weight of stars and bad news. Yes, sir? This is General Thomas Mitchell, Joint Special Operations Command. I need to speak with you about your brother. The world tilted sideways. Tyler's hand gripped the phone so hard the case creaked. My brother? Jason? Your brother's unit was ambushed in Helmand Province 4 hours ago. They're currently surrounded by enemy forces and fighting for survival. The room spun. Tyler sat down hard on his bunk. Derek's hand landed on his shoulder, steadying him. Is he alive? The question came out as a whisper. As of 20 minutes ago, yes, but the situation is critical. We've deployed our bestest signals to provide overwatch and delay the enemy assault until we can get a quick reaction force on site. What asset? Phantom 5. Tyler's brain made the connection even though it seemed impossible. Sir, is that Sarah Kincaid? There was a pause on the other end of the line. You know her, Sergeant? Tyler looked at the beer stains on his uniform, thought about the manual he had watched Liam destroy, remembered the feel of Sarah's wrist under his grip. Sir, I met her tonight. We had an encounter at a local bar. What kind of encounter? The kind where I acted like an asshole and she walked away, sir. Tyler's voice was hollow. We humiliated her, mocked her, destroyed her property, and now you're telling me she's flying into a combat zone to save my brother? Another pause. Sergeant, what did she do when you humiliated her? Nothing, sir. She paid for the damaged manual and tried to leave. I grabbed her wrist to stop her. Then Colonel Davis arrived and took her away. I see. The general's voice had gone very quiet. Sergeant Brennan, I'm going to tell you something that's going to stay between us. Phantom 5 requested to deploy without her spotter. That's against protocol. It's also something operators only do when they know the odds are suicide, but they're going anyway because Americans are dying. She volunteered for this mission knowing she might not come back. Tyler felt sick. Why? Why would she do that after what we did? Because that's what warriors do, Sergeant. They protect, even those who wrong them, even those who don't deserve it. The general's voice hardened. Now, is there anything else you need to tell me about your interaction with Phantom 5? No, sir, just that I'm sorry, and I hope she makes it. So do I, Sergeant, so do I. The line went dead. Tyler sat in the silence of the barracks, surrounded by his team, his brothers, his fellow Rangers. The alcohol had burned off completely, replaced by a sobriety that went bone deep. She's going to save Jason, he said to the room. The woman we humiliated is flying into Afghanistan alone to save my brother's unit. Derek's voice was small. How many enemy fighters? The general said the unit was surrounded by 200 Taliban. And she's going alone? Tyler nodded, unable to speak. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Kentucky night. We fucked up. We fucked up so bad. Liam, the youngest, sank onto a bunk with his head in his hands. I poured beer on her manual. I destroyed her book while she was sitting there trying to study how to save people like us. The 4 Rangers sat in the darkness, each lost in their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own dawning realization of what they had done. They had judged a warrior by her cover story and found her wanting. They had mocked a protector while she prepared to protect. They had failed the most basic test of character, and Sarah Kincaid had passed it by choosing to save them anyway. 8,000 miles away, a C-17 Globemaster III climbed through the night sky over the Atlantic Ocean, carrying one soldier toward a battlefield where 48 Americans were counting the minutes until dawn brought death. Sarah Kincaid sat alone in the cargo bay, her rifle across her lap, her eyes closed but not sleeping. The mission brief was memorized. The terrain was mapped in her mind. The enemy positions were cataloged and prioritized. All that remained was the execution, the moment when training became action and plans became survival. She thought about Tyler Brennan's hand on her wrist, the casual cruelty of men who thought themselves warriors but had never learned what that word truly meant. She thought about the destroyed manual, the mocking laughter, the beer soaking into pages of tactical knowledge. Then she thought about Captain Jason Brennan, a man she had never met, fighting for his life while his younger brother celebrated 8,000 miles away. The mission mattered more than her ego. The mission always mattered more. Sarah opened her eyes and began her pre-combat checks, running through the ritual that had kept her alive through 47 previous operations. Rifle function check, ammunition count, equipment security, communications test. Each step performed with mechanical precision, the muscle memory of someone who had done this so many times it was written into her DNA. The C-17's crew chief approached with a tablet. Phantom 5, update from command. Enemy has begun preliminary assault. Your ETA to Bagram is 6 hours. They're estimating the Rangers have maybe 4 hours of ammunition left. Sarah did the math. She would arrive with negative 2 hours to spare. Unless the Rangers could hold longer than estimated, unless the enemy assault took longer to develop than projected, unless miracles happened and physics bent, unless she was better than she had ever been before. Understood. Any change to insertion plan? Negative. Halo jump from 2,000 meters, 2 clicks from the compound. You'll have 90 minutes of darkness before dawn. Good. The crew chief hesitated. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Granted. I've been flying special operations for 12 years. I've never seen a solo insertion against odds like this. You really think you can hold off 200 fighters alone? Sarah looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. I don't have to hold off 200 fighters, Chief. I just have to make them think twice about attacking. Fear is a weapon, too. And if fear doesn't work, then I'll use the other 400 rounds in my kit. The crew chief nodded slowly and walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her rifle and the cold certainty of impossible odds. The C-17 flew on through the darkness, carrying death toward those who threatened American lives, carrying hope toward those who had given up hoping, carrying one quiet woman who had been humiliated in a bar and responded by volunteering to die for the men who humiliated her. Because that's what warriors did. They protected, even when it hurt, even when it cost everything, even when no one would ever know their names. Sarah Kincaid closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the engines lull her into the shallow rest of someone who knew the next time she slept might be permanent. Her last thought before the darkness took her was simple and clear. 48 Rangers, 200 enemies, 90 minutes until dawn. Time to go to work. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through Afghan darkness like a blade through silk, its rotors beating a rhythm that Sarah Kincaid felt in her bones. Below, the Helmand Province landscape rolled past in shades of gray and black, mountains and valleys carved by millennia of wind and war. The pilot's voice crackled through her headset, professional and tense. Phantom 5, best I can do is 2 kilometers from the compound. Taliban control everything closer. Anti-aircraft activity is heavy. Sarah studied the terrain through her night vision goggles, mapping the ridgelines and valleys against the satellite imagery burned into her memory. 2 kilometers was perfect. Close enough to be effective, far enough to remain invisible. 2 clicks is acceptable. Find me the highest point with eastern exposure. Copy that. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes until she stepped into the void. 4 minutes until 48 American lives became her sole responsibility. 4 minutes to run through mental checklists that had been drilled into her through 10,000 hours of training. The helicopter banked hard, following the contours of a ridgeline that rose like a spine from the valley floor. Through the open door, Sarah could see muzzle flashes in the distance, the strobing light of automatic weapons fire creating a deadly constellation against the dark. The Rangers were still fighting, still alive, still counting on help that might arrive too late. The crew chief gave her the 2-minute warning. Sarah moved to the door, her rifle slung across her back, her ghillie suit creating a silhouette that looked more shadow than human. The wind tore at her gear with fingers of ice, the temperature at this altitude hovering just above freezing. Phantom 5, the pilot's voice carried a note of something that might have been respect or might have been pity. You're really going to fight 200 fighters alone? Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable in the darkness. No, I'm going to make them think they're fighting ghosts. The crew chief gave the signal. Sarah stepped into the darkness and fell. The halo jump lasted 23 seconds of pure silence. No rotor wash, no engine noise, just the whisper of wind and the hammering of her own heartbeat. She pulled the chute at exactly the right moment, the black canopy deploying with practiced precision, invisible against the starless sky. Sarah landed on a rocky outcropping 2,134 meters from the besieged compound, her boots finding purchase on stone that had witnessed 1,000 years of violence. She collapsed the chute, buried it under rocks with movements born from repetition, and moved to her firing position with the silence of smoke. The position was perfect. A natural rock formation created a hide that gave her 270 degrees of observation while protecting her back. She could see the entire valley, every approach, every enemy position. More importantly, they couldn't see her. Sarah assembled her rifle with the intimacy of a lover, each component fitting together in an order she could perform blind. The Macmillan TAC 338 was an extension of her will, a tool that translated intention into lethal reality at distances most people couldn't comprehend. She settled behind the scope and began her calculations. Range to compound, 2,134 meters. Elevation difference, 340 meters. Shooting downward, which would affect her ballistics in ways that required instant mental math. Wind, 9 knots from the northwest, gusting to 12. Temperature, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 22%. Every variable mattered. Every calculation could mean the difference between life and death. Through her thermal optics, the valley came alive with heat signatures. She counted methodically, compartmentalizing the battlefield into sectors and priority targets. 187 Taliban fighters distributed across 6 primary positions, with crew-served weapons creating interlocking fields of fire that turned the compound into a killing box. The Rangers inside that box were already dead men. They just didn't know it yet. Unless Sarah could change the math. She keyed her radio, the encrypted channel connecting her directly to the trapped Americans. Dagger 6, this is Phantom 5. I am on station. Authenticate. The response came back immediately, tight with stress and fading hope. Phantom 5, Dagger 6 actual. Authentication code, Charlie Oscar, 7-9er. Who the hell are you and where the hell is our air support? Sarah recognized something in that voice. The particular blend of authority and desperation that came from watching men die while being powerless to stop it. Captain Jason Brennan sounded exactly like his younger brother. The same cadence, the same timbre, the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Dagger 6, I'm your air support. Keep your people down and mark your position with IR strobes. I'm about to go to work. One person? They sent one person? They sent the only person you need, Captain. Maintain radio discipline and trust the process. Sarah could hear the disbelief in his silence, but he was professional enough not to argue. Copy, Phantom 5. Be advised, enemy is massing for final assault. We estimate 30 minutes until they push. Then I'll give you 31 minutes, Captain. Phantom 5 out. Sarah centered her breathing, finding that perfect calm that existed between heartbeats. Her first shots wouldn't be kills. They would be questions. They would be fear. They would be the opening moves in a psychological chess game where the enemy didn't know they were playing. The Taliban commander stood in the center of a group, gesturing toward the compound with the confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. He was tall for an Afghan, maybe 6 feet, wearing a distinctive Pakol hat and carrying an AK-47 with custom furniture. A leader, a priority target. But Sarah didn't shoot him. Instead, she aimed at the radio in his hand, the small black rectangle that connected him to his dispersed forces. Range, 2,134 meters. Wind correction, 4.7 minutes of angle. Elevation, 6.2 minutes of angle. Flight time, 2.8 seconds. Sarah exhaled slowly, found the pause between heartbeats where the world went still, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared. The suppressor reduced the sound from thunder to a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding mountains, impossible to locate by ear alone. 2,800 meters away, and 2.8 seconds later, the radio in the Taliban commander's hand exploded into plastic fragments and circuit board shrapnel. The commander dropped the ruined device like it had bitten him, staring at his hand in shock. His men scattered, looking for threats they couldn't see, firing blind into the darkness at enemies that existed only in their imagination. Sarah had already cycled the bolt and acquired her second target. A PKM machine gun team was setting up on a ridge that would give them perfect enfilade fire into the compound. 2 men, one feeding ammunition, one behind the gun. They were 4 minutes from being ready to fire. Sarah gave them 3 minutes and 58 seconds to live. She didn't shoot the gunner. She shot the optics on the PKM itself, the tritium sight that glowed faintly in the darkness. The round struck dead center, destroying the weapon's ability to aim with precision. The gunner jerked back, shouting something Sarah couldn't hear, frantically checking his weapon for damage. Fear, confusion, the beginning of doubt. Third shot, an RPG gunner preparing to fire at the compound's western wall. Sarah could see him in thermal, the heat signature of the warhead bright against the cool night. She didn't shoot the man. She shot the RPG itself, striking the warhead with surgical precision. The explosion lit up the night like a miniature sun. The warhead detonated, killing the gunner and 3 fighters nearby, sending shrapnel in a radius that wounded 5 more. The blast created chaos, men diving for cover, shouting warnings, firing blindly at shadows. Sarah had fired 3 rounds and created panic in an organized assault force. Fourth shot, a Toyota Technical was maneuvering into position, a Soviet-era DSHK heavy machine gun mounted in the bed. That weapon could chew through the compound walls like paper. The driver was being careful, using terrain features for cover, but he had to cross 20 meters of open ground to reach his firing position. Sarah waited with the patience of stone. The Technical emerged from behind a boulder. Sarah fired. The round punched through the engine block with devastating precision, steam and coolant erupting from the destroyed radiator. The vehicle lurched to a stop, useless. The gunner tried to dismount to engage on foot. Sarah's second shot caught him mid-leap. Inside the compound, Captain Jason Brennan crouched behind a crumbling mud wall with 47 other Rangers who had spent the last 4 hours learning what it meant to be hunted. His uniform was caked with dust and blood, some his own, most belonging to the 17 men who hadn't made it this far. The ammunition pouches on his vest held maybe 30 rounds, conservatively. Around him, his surviving soldiers were in similar shape. Sergeant First Class Martinez, his senior NCO, low-crawled to his position. "Sir, we got activity on the radio, someone claiming to be our air support." "I know, Phantom 5, whoever that is." "1 call sign, that means 1 person, sir." "I know that too, Martinez." "Sir, with respect, 1 shooter can't stop 200 fighters." The explosion to the west lit up the compound's interior with orange light. Then another to the north. Then the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the valley, impossible to locate but unmistakably close. Martinez stared at the chaos erupting in the enemy positions. What the hell is happening out there? Jason keyed his radio. Phantom 5, Dagger 6, what's your status? Sarah's voice came back calm, almost bored. Engaging targets of opportunity. Recommend your people stay low, about to increase tempo. How many shooters do you have? Just me, Captain. One person is doing that? I prefer to work alone, less complicated. Phantom 5 out. Martinez looked at his company commander with something approaching awe. Sir, who is Phantom 5? I don't know, Sergeant, but I'm starting to think whoever they are, they're the best chance we've got. Back at Fort Campbell, dawn was breaking over Kentucky with the kind of golden light that promised a beautiful day. Tyler Brennan hadn't slept. He sat in the day room with Derek, Marcus, and Liam, all of them staring at a television showing CNN International with the sound muted. The news was running a story about increased Taliban activity in Helmand province, using file footage and generic commentary that had no idea what was really happening. Tyler's phone rang. He looked at the screen. General Mitchell, again. Sir? Sergeant Brennan, this is a courtesy call. Phantom 5 is on station. She's engaging the enemy now. She. The confirmation hit Tyler like a physical blow. Is she okay, sir? She's doing what she does best. The Rangers she's protecting don't even know what's happening. They think they're watching a coordinated air assault. They have no idea it's one woman with a rifle. The general paused. Your brother is alive, Sergeant. Phantom 5 is buying him time. The question is whether it's enough. Sir, request permission to deploy to assist. Denied. You're 8,000 miles away with no authorization, no transport, and no way to get there in time to make a difference. The general's voice softened slightly, but I understand the impulse. That's why I'm calling. I wanted you to know she's there. She went alone, but your brother isn't alone anymore. Tyler closed his eyes. Thank you, sir. Sergeant, one more thing. When this is over, assuming Phantom 5 makes it back, I'm going to strongly suggest you find a way to apologize properly. Flowers won't cut it. Neither will words. I know, sir. I'll find a way. The general hung up. Derek had been listening to Tyler's side of the conversation. She's there? She's actually fighting? 200 Taliban, one shooter, and she's winning. Tyler stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Fort Campbell, waking up to another routine day. Somewhere on the other side of the world, a woman they had humiliated was dying to save his brother. The mathematics of guilt didn't work that way. There was no equation that made this right. Marcus spoke quietly. We need to do something. We can't just sit here. What can we do? Liam's voice was hollow. We're on the wrong continent. By the time we could get there, it'll be over one way or another. Tyler turned back to face them. Then we prepare, because if she makes it back, if she saves Jason and those Rangers, we're going to spend the rest of our careers proving we learned the lesson. What lesson? Derek asked. That warriors protect, even when it costs them everything. Even when the people they're protecting don't deserve it. Tyler's jaw set with determination. She's showing us what real strength looks like. The least we can do is pay attention. In Afghanistan, Sarah had fired 12 rounds in 8 minutes and created tactical chaos across 6 enemy positions. The Taliban assault had stalled, their carefully coordinated plan dissolving into confusion and fear as their equipment was destroyed by an invisible enemy they couldn't locate. But confusion only bought time. It didn't win battles. Through her scope, Sarah watched the enemy commander, the man whose radio she had destroyed, gathering his subordinates. He was gesturing, reorganizing, adapting, smart, experienced. Probably a veteran of the Soviet War, someone who had been fighting longer than Sarah had been alive. He would figure out eventually that this was one shooter. He would send men to sweep the ridgelines. He would mass his forces for an assault that no single person could stop. Sarah needed to accelerate his education in fear. She shifted her aim to a mortar team setting up 2,650 meters away. Extreme range even for her. The wind had shifted, now coming from the east at 10 knots, gusting unpredictably. Temperature was rising as dawn approached, which would affect her ballistics through mirage and density changes. The math was complex. The shot was borderline impossible. Sarah took it anyway. The round flew for 3.1 seconds, arcing through the cold air, fighting wind and gravity and probability. It struck the mortar tube dead center just as the crew was loading their first round. The secondary explosion was spectacular, the mortar ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction that killed 4 men and wounded 6 more. The enemy positions erupted in panic. Men scattered, abandoning their carefully prepared fighting positions, running for cover from an enemy they couldn't see. Sarah tracked one runner through her scope, a young fighter, maybe 20, terror written in every movement. She let him go. Not every enemy needed to die. Some needed to survive to tell stories. Fear was a force multiplier, and terrified survivors created better propaganda than corpses. Captain Jason Brennan watched the valley light up with explosions and tried to process what he was seeing. In 4 years of combat deployments, he had never witnessed anything like this. It looked like close air support, but there were no aircraft. It sounded like artillery, but there were no guns. It was just one person with a rifle doing things that shouldn't be possible. Sir, Specialist Williams, the youngest ranger in the company, crawled over with wide eyes. Sir, what's happening? Phantom 5 is happening, Williams. One person can't do that, sir. That's impossible. Jason looked at his soldier, this kid who was 22 years old and had watched 17 of his brothers die tonight. Williams, I've learned something in my 4 deployments. When someone tells you their call sign is Phantom, you stop asking what's possible and start being grateful they're on your side. The radio crackled. Sarah's voice still calm. Dagger 6, enemy is attempting to flank your position from the southeast. 4-man team with RPGs. Recommend you collapse your eastern perimeter by 5 meters. Jason didn't question how she could see a 4-man team in the dark from 2 kilometers away. He just gave the order. His rangers pulled back exactly 5 meters. 15 seconds later, the RPG rounds impacted where they had been, throwing up clouds of dust and shrapnel that would have killed anyone still in position. Contact southeast, Martinez shouted, returning fire at the muzzle flashes. Through her scope, Sarah had already acquired the RPG team. 4 targets moving through broken terrain, using cover effectively. Professional. Dangerous. She fired 4 times in 6 seconds. 4 men stopped moving. The radio again. Dagger 6, threat neutralized. Suggest you conserve ammunition. Long night ahead. Jason stared at his radio like it was speaking a language he didn't understand. Phantom 5, how could you possibly... Captain, I can see everything from up here. Trust me and focus on keeping your people alive. I'll handle the enemy. Martinez looked at Jason with something approaching religious awe. Sir, whoever Phantom 5 is, I want to buy them a beer when this is over. Get in line, Martinez. Get in line. The Taliban commander, a man named Zahir, who had been fighting invaders since he was 15 years old, gathered his remaining leadership in a ravine protected from observation. They had started the night with 187 fighters and absolute confidence. Now they had 142 fighters and growing dread. It's one shooter. Zahir's lieutenant was young, educated in Pakistan, trained by people who understood modern warfare. Has to be. The angle of fire is consistent. Same position, same vector. American sniper, probably special operations. Zahir had lost too many men to American snipers to dismiss the assessment. Then we find them and kill them. Send 40 men to sweep the eastern ridgeline. If it's one person, we can afford to lose 20 to eliminate them. And if we're wrong, if there are more, then we die as martyrs. But I don't think we're wrong. I think one American believes they can stop us. Zahir smiled without humor. They are about to learn otherwise. Sarah saw the sweep team organizing through her thermal optics. 40 men, moving in dispersed formation, heading directly toward her position. 800 meters away and closing. Professional movements, good spacing, using terrain effectively. She had maybe 10 minutes before they reached her hide. The choice was brutal in its simplicity. She could engage the sweep team, which would require her to fire rapidly, giving away her exact position to the remaining 100-plus fighters. Or she could relocate, which would take her off Overwatch for the critical minutes the enemy might use to assault the compound. Either choice could get the Rangers killed. Sarah made a third choice. She activated the remote camera she had set up 30 meters from her actual position, a small thermal decoy that would show a heat signature consistent with a human. Then she packed her rifle with movements born from 10,000 repetitions and began moving. 400 meters, 90 seconds, through terrain that would break most people's ankles in daylight. Sarah covered the distance in 87 seconds, her ghillie suit making her invisible, her movements silent despite the speed. She reached her alternate position, a cluster of boulders that gave her a different angle on the valley, and set up her rifle just as the sweep team reached her old hide. Through her scope, she watched them find the decoy camera. Watch them concentrate around it, believing they had found her. Watch them make themselves into a perfect target. Sarah didn't fire. Instead, she keyed her radio. Dagger 6, enemy has 40 fighters concentrated on the eastern ridge. Grid reference 374892. Can you spare 1 mortar round? Jason's response was immediate. Phantom 5, we have 3 rounds left total. You sure about this? Trust me, Captain. 15 seconds later, a single 60mm mortar round arced through the pre-dawn darkness and landed in the middle of the concentrated sweep team. The explosion was devastating, bodies thrown like ragdolls, the close-packed formation turning a single round into catastrophic casualties. Sarah counted 18 killed, 14 wounded badly enough to require evacuation. The remaining 8 scattered in terror. Good effect on target, she reported calmly. Enemy sweep team neutralized. You now have 2 mortar rounds remaining. Jason's voice carried disbelief. You just tricked them into bunching up for our mortar. Tactical deception is a weapon too, Captain. Phantom 5 out. Zahir watched his sweep team destroyed and felt something he hadn't experienced in 30 years of war. Not fear exactly, but a growing awareness that he was facing something outside his experience. This wasn't a normal American sniper. This was something else entirely. Pull everyone back 200 meters, he ordered. We wait for reinforcements. Reinforcements, Commander? I sent word 4 hours ago. 60 fighters from the Sangin district. They should arrive by dawn. Zahir looked at the compound where the Americans huddled. Let this ghost shooter kill a few more of our men. When the sun rises and reinforcements arrive, we'll mass assault from all sides simultaneously. No sniper can stop 200 fighters attacking at once. The lieutenant nodded. And if this phantom kills more of us before then those men die as martyrs. But the Americans will still die. Tyler's phone rang again. Not General Mitchell this time. An unknown number with an international prefix. Hello? Tyler. The voice was rough with exhaustion and stress, but unmistakably familiar. Jason? Tyler nearly dropped the phone. You're alive. Oh, thank God you're alive. For now, little brother. Listen, I don't have much time. I'm calling on a sat phone we have maybe 5 minutes of battery left on. I know about Phantom 5. General Mitchell called me. Then you know one person is keeping 48 of us alive against impossible odds. Jason's voice dropped. Tyler, who is Phantom 5? The general wouldn't tell me anything except a call sign. Tyler closed his eyes. Her name is Sarah Kincaid. She's a specialist. She works supply cover at Fort Campbell. A woman. They sent one woman. Jason, she's not really supply. That's her cover. She's something called Phantom 5. Special operations, higher clearance than anything we'll ever have. Tyler's voice cracked. And I humiliated her last night. We mocked her, destroyed her property. I grabbed her wrist like she was nothing. Then this morning, she volunteered to fly into hell alone to save you. The silence on the other end stretched for 5 seconds. Why would she do that? Jason finally asked. After what you did. Because that's what warriors do, apparently. They protect, even when it costs them everything. Tyler was crying now, not caring who saw. Jason, if she gets you out, if she saves you and your rangers, you need to tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I understand now what real strength looks like. Tell her yourself when I get home, brother. If you get home. When? Because I've watched Phantom 5 work, Tyler. I've seen her do things that shouldn't be possible. She's killed maybe 40 enemy fighters already, and they still can't find her. She's fought for 6 hours without sleep, without support, without anything but her rifle and her will. Jason's voice filled with conviction. Whatever you did to her, she's already forgiven it. Because she's here. That's the forgiveness. The sat phone beeped a low battery warning. I have to go, Jason said. Tyler, I love you. Tell Mom I'll call when this is over. I love you too. Stay alive, Jason. Let Phantom 5 do her job. The line went dead. Tyler looked at Derek, Marcus, and Liam, who had been listening to his side of the conversation. My brother says she's killed 40 fighters already, by herself. 40. Marcus shook his head in wonder. That's impossible. Stop saying impossible, Tyler snapped. She's doing it. Right now, while we sit here safe, she's out there proving what's possible when you stop making excuses. Liam stood up. I want to join the Phantom program. The other 3 turned to stare at him. If she makes it back, Liam continued, if we get the chance, I want to learn to be that kind of warrior. The kind who protects instead of postures. The kind who saves instead of shows off. Derek nodded slowly. Me too. Count me in, Marcus added. Tyler looked at his team, these men he had led into humiliation and who now wanted redemption. Then we train. Starting tomorrow, we train like our lives depend on it. Because if we're lucky enough to be selected for that program, we need to be worthy of it. In Afghanistan, dawn was breaking over the Helmand Province Valley, painting the mountains in shades of gold and red that would have been beautiful if they weren't framing a battlefield. Sarah had been firing continuously for 6 hours and 11 minutes. She had eliminated 43 enemy fighters and destroyed 7 vehicles and 4 crew-served weapons. Her ammunition count was down to 327 rounds. Her hands ached. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope. Her mouth was dry as dust because she had run out of water 3 hours ago. But the Rangers were still alive. Through her scope, she watched new heat signatures approaching from the northwest. Vehicles. Lots of them. Her heart sank as she counted. 12 Toyota Technicals, each carrying 4 to 6 fighters. Reinforcements. She keyed her radio. Dagger 6, be advised. Enemy reinforcements approaching from northwest. Count 50 to 60 additional combatants. ETA 15 minutes. Captain Brennan's response was hollow. Copy, Phantom 5. That brings total enemy strength to approximately 200. Our ammunition status is critical. We have maybe 100 rounds total left. Sarah did the math. 200 enemies, 100 friendly rounds, 327 rounds in her kit. The Rangers' quick reaction force was still 2 hours out. The numbers didn't work, unless she made them work. Dagger 6, I need you to trust me completely for the next 20 minutes. We've trusted you this far, Phantom 5, not stopping now. Good. On my command, I need every Ranger who can still fire to shoot 1 round into the air. Not at the enemy, straight up. What? Why? Because I'm going to make the enemy think you have unlimited ammunition and massive reinforcements. Psychology is a weapon, Captain. Trust me. Sarah watched the reinforcements arrive. Watch them consolidate with Zahira's remaining forces. Watch them prepare for a massive coordinated assault. 204 fighters by her count, all gathering in the valley, organizing into assault waves, loading weapons, fixing bayonets. They thought they were about to win. Sarah was about to teach them otherwise. She picked her first target with care. The new commander, the one who had brought the reinforcements, standing tall and confident in the center of his men. Range, 1,982 meters. Wind, 8 knots, variable. She had one chance to set the tone. Sarah fired. The round took the commander in the center of his chest, dropping him instantly. Before his body hit the ground, Sarah had cycled the bolt and fired again, killing the man next to him. Then again, and again. 4 leaders dead in 8 seconds. Now Dagger 6, fire! Inside the compound, 48 Rangers fired their remaining ammunition straight into the air, creating a massive volume of fire that sounded like a company-sized element, not a depleted platoon. The enemy assault wave hesitated. Sarah didn't. She fired 21 rounds in 3 minutes, working from left to right across the massed enemy formation. Each shot was a kill. Each kill created panic. Each moment of panic grew exponentially as fighters watched their comrades die from an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't locate, couldn't fight. Machine gun team, 3 shots, 3 dead. RPG crew, 2 shots, both dead. Squad leader, 1 shot, 1 kill. Forward observer, 1 shot, 1 kill. The Taliban assault dissolved before it began. Men who had been prepared to charge into martyrdom now broke and ran, fleeing back to their vehicles, abandoning their weapons, screaming warnings about American reinforcements and air support. Zahir tried to rally them, shouting, firing his AK-47 into the air, cursing them as cowards. Sarah put a round through his shoulder, spinning him to the ground without killing him. She needed him alive to spread the story, to tell other fighters that attacking Americans in this valley meant death from invisible demons. The rout was complete. 204 fighters became a mob of terrified men running for their lives. Their vehicles fled north, leaving behind the dead and wounded and all their heavy weapons. Sarah counted 97 enemy casualties, 97 men who wouldn't threaten Americans again, and 107 survivors who would tell stories that would keep other fighters away from this valley for months. She keyed her radio. Dagger 6, enemy is in full retreat. Quick reaction force ETA. Phantom 5, we have Apaches inbound. 5 minutes. Ground forces 20 minutes behind them. Copy. I'll maintain overwatch until extraction is complete. Phantom 5. Jason's voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You saved 48 Americans tonight. You did what an entire battalion couldn't do. I did my job, Captain. Now you do yours. Get your wounded ready for evac. And Captain? Yes? Your brother Tyler says he's sorry. He wants you to know he understands now what real warriors look like. There was a long pause. You know Tyler. We met last night. He poured beer on my field manual. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Tell him when you see him that I'll accept his apology if he learns a lesson. Warriors protect. Always. I'll tell him, Phantom 5. I'll tell him. The Apache helicopters arrived like avenging angels, their 30mm cannons making short work of any enemy fighters foolish enough to still be in the valley. The quick reaction force secured the compound perimeter. Medics triaged the wounded. The living were counted and found to number 48. 48 Rangers who had walked into an ambush and walked back out alive because one woman with a rifle had refused to let them die. Sarah remained in her hide watching the extraction, making sure every Ranger was loaded onto the helicopters before she considered her mission complete. Nathan Reeves, her spotter, had finally arrived, 4 hours too late to help, but in time to witness the aftermath. Phantom 5, this is Phantom 5 Alpha. Nathan's voice carried awe. I'm on the ridge. I can see the valley. Sarah, what did you do? My job. There are bodies everywhere. The Rangers are calling it a miracle. They think they were saved by an entire special operations team. Good. Let them think that. You're not going to tell them? Why would I? The mission is complete. The Rangers are safe. My identity doesn't matter. Sarah began breaking down her rifle, preparing to exfiltrate. She had fired 283 rounds. killed 97 enemy combatants, and saved 48 American lives. By any measure, it was a successful operation. But all she felt was tired. The extraction helicopter landed on a ridge 30 minutes later. Sarah climbed aboard, her ghillie suit covered in dust and powder residue, her face showing the strain of 11 hours of continuous combat. Nathan was already there, looking at her like she was something supernatural. You fought 200 fighters alone and won. I delayed them until help arrived. That's different from winning. Sarah, you killed 97 men in 11 hours. That's beyond anything in the record books. Then I'm glad the record books are classified. Sarah closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her. How long until we're back at Bagram? 40 minutes. Wake me in 39. But before she could sleep, her satellite phone vibrated. She checked the screen. General Mitchell. Phantom 5. Well done doesn't begin to cover it, Specialist Kincaid. You just saved my career, 48 Rangers, and probably prevented a strategic disaster. The general's voice carried warmth she had never heard before. The president is being briefed as we speak. There will be medals, though they'll be classified. There will be promotions, though your cover will remain intact. I don't want medals, sir. I know you don't, but you're getting them anyway. Phantom 5, I have one question. Why did you volunteer to go without a spotter? You know that's suicide protocol. You only do that when you don't expect to come back. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Sir, those Rangers were dying because someone's intelligence failed them. Someone made a mistake and 48 Americans paid the price. I couldn't let them keep paying. That's not an answer to my question. Yes, sir, it is. Sometimes the mission matters more than the operator. You taught me that. The general was silent. Then get some rest, Phantom 5. You've earned it. The helicopter flew through the Afghan morning, carrying Sarah towards safety and sleep, and the invisible life that waited for her back at Fort Campbell. Below, the valley was peaceful now, the sun burning away the evidence of the night's violence. Somewhere in that valley, Zahir sat with a shattered shoulder, surrounded by his surviving fighters, trying to explain how one American had destroyed his carefully planned assault. The story he told would grow with each telling, becoming legend, becoming mythology. But Sarah Kincaid didn't care about legends. She cared that 48 Rangers were going home to their families. She cared that Tyler Brennan would see his brother again. She cared that her mission was complete. Everything else was just noise. The helicopter landed at Bagram Air Base 12 hours after Sarah had jumped into the darkness. She was met by Colonel Davis, who looked at her with an expression that mixed respect and concern. Specialist, you need medical attention. I need sleep, sir. You've been awake for 36 hours. 38, actually, but who's counting? Davis gestured toward a waiting vehicle. The general wants to debrief you, but I told him it can wait until you're conscious. Let's get you to quarters. Sarah walked toward the vehicle, every muscle screaming protest. She had fired 283 rounds, moved 400 meters under fire, fought 11 hours straight, and saved 48 lives. It was just another Thursday. Sir, she said as they drove, the Rangers I saved, they don't know who I am, right? Correct. They think they were saved by a special operations team. Your identity remains classified. Good. I'd like to keep it that way. Why, you could claim the credit? You earned it. Sarah looked out the window at Bagram, this massive military base in the middle of nowhere, filled with thousands of Americans serving in ways both visible and invisible. Because the mission matters more than the recognition. Sir, that's what makes us different from them. Colonel Davis nodded slowly. The Rangers you saved are being flown back to Fort Campbell. They'll arrive in 3 days. You'll be back before them. Then I'll be in supply when they return, processing their equipment, counting their ammunition expenditure, being invisible again. Doesn't that frustrate you, being invisible? No, sir. Invisible means I can keep doing the job. Visible means I become a symbol instead of an operator. I prefer the work. They arrived at the billeting area. Davis handed her a room key. 48 hours of enforced rest. That's an order. When you wake up, we'll debrief. Then you're flying home. Sarah took the key. Thank you, sir. She entered the room, set her rifle carefully in the corner, and collapsed onto the bed without removing her gear. Sleep took her in seconds, the deep, exhausted sleep of someone who had burned every reserve and earned every moment of rest. 8,000 miles away in Kentucky, Tyler Brennan stood in his barracks room, looking at a photo of his brother on his phone. Jason was alive. 48 Rangers were alive. Because one woman had volunteered to die for them. The shame of what he had done sat in his stomach like acid. He had judged Sarah Kincaid by her cover story and found her wanting. He had mocked her knowledge, destroyed her property, grabbed her wrist like she was nothing. And she had responded by saving his brother's life. There was no apology large enough for that. No words sufficient to bridge that gap. All Tyler could do was learn the lesson and spend the rest of his career trying to become worthy of what Sarah had shown him. Derek sat on his bunk, cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision. When she gets back, What do we say? Nothing, Tyler replied. We don't say anything. We show her through our actions that we learned. We become the warriors she already is. And if we get selected for the Phantom program, then we honor her example every single day. We protect instead of posture. We serve instead of show off. We become invisible so others can be safe. Marcus looked up from the field manual he was reading, one very similar to the one they had destroyed. Think she'll train us? I don't know, but if she does, we better be ready to prove we're worth the investment. Liam set down his phone. I've been reading about Afghanistan. The reports are saying a platoon of Rangers was saved by massive air support and special operations intervention. They're calling it a miracle. It was a miracle, Tyler said quietly. A miracle named Sarah Kincaid, who decided 48 lives mattered more than her pride. The four Rangers sat in silence, each processing the night's events in their own way. They had started the evening as confident warriors, secure in their identity and their worth. They would end it as students who had barely glimpsed what true warriorhood looked like. The lesson had costed them their pride, but it might save their souls. In Afghanistan, Sarah Kincaid slept the dreamless sleep of the exhausted. Tomorrow she would wake, debrief, and fly home to her invisible life. She would return to counting boxes and processing requisitions and being dismissed as just supply. And when the time came, when Americans were in danger and conventional options had failed, she would pick up her rifle and vanish into the shadows again. Because that was the job. And the job was all that mattered. The C-17 touched down at Fort Campbell 3 days after Sarah Kincaid had jumped into the Afghan darkness. The Kentucky autumn had turned the base into a painting of gold and crimson, the kind of beauty that seemed obscene after 11 hours of combat and 97 dead men. Sarah walked down the cargo ramp in her logistics corps uniform, supply specialist patch visible, specialist rank gleaming in the afternoon sun. Nobody saluted. Nobody stared. She was invisible again, just another soldier returning from another deployment to another desk job that nobody noticed and fewer cared about. Exactly as it should be. Exactly as she needed it to be. Colonel Davis met her at the flight line with a government sedan and the kind of expression that suggested complicated conversations were coming. Specialist Kincaid, welcome home. Thank you, sir. The general wants to see you at 1600 hours. Full debrief. Understood. Sarah threw her gear bag into the trunk. Sir, the Rangers I extracted, are they back yet? Arriving tomorrow morning. Their aircraft had mechanical issues, delayed them 48 hours. Davis looked at her carefully. Why do you ask? Just confirming timeline, sir. Sarah. The use of her first name made her look up. Davis rarely broke professional distance. Those Rangers are calling you a miracle. They don't know your name, don't know your face, but they know someone saved them when everyone else had given up. Captain Brennan has been requesting information about the special operations team that provided Overwatch. What did you tell him? That the operation is classified and he doesn't have clearance for details. Davis opened the passenger door for her. He's not satisfied with that answer. He'll have to be, sir. They drove through Fort Campbell in silence, past the ranges where soldiers trained and the barracks where they lived, and the headquarters where careers were made and broken. Sarah watched it all with the detached observation of someone who existed in the spaces between, who moved through this world without leaving footprints. Davis broke the silence as they approached her unit area. The four Rangers from Murphy's Tavern, Sergeant Brennan and his team, they've been asking about you. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest. Asking what? Where you are? When you'll be back? They've come by the logistics office twice a day for 3 days. Davis glanced over. Whatever happened between you and them, they seem very motivated to find you. I prefer they didn't, sir. I know, but Sarah, sometimes closure is necessary. For them, not for you. Closure means revealing my identity. That compromises operational security. Your identity was already compromised the moment you stood up to them in that bar. They know you're something more than supply. The question is whether you give them answers or let them imagine answers that might be worse than the truth. The sedan pulled up to Sarah's quarters, a standard enlisted barracks room that looked exactly like 10,000 other rooms on military bases worldwide. Small, functional, anonymous, home. 1600 hours, sir, I'll be there. Davis nodded and drove away, leaving Sarah standing in the parking lot with her gear bag and the weight of 3 days that felt like 3 years. She climbed the stairs to her room, unlocked the door, and stepped into a space that showed no evidence anyone actually lived there. No photos on the walls, no personal items on the desk, just standard issue furniture and the kind of emptiness that came from living two lives and feeling at home in neither. Sarah unpacked her gear with mechanical precision, cleaning her rifle even though the armory had already done it, checking her equipment even though nothing had changed during the flight. The ritual was necessary, the muscle memory that kept her grounded when the mission started blurring together into one long firefight with different locations and different casualties, but the same ending. She won. Americans went home. She remained invisible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan Reeves. "How you holding up?" Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Fine." That's not an answer, and we both know it. 97 kills in 11 hours isn't fine. That's not even human. Then it's a good thing I'm a phantom. Sarah, I'm serious. You need to talk to someone. I'm talking to you. I mean professionally. The psych eval after missions like that is mandatory for a reason. Sarah set the phone down without responding. She had attended enough psychological evaluations to know how they worked. The therapist would ask how she felt. She would say fine. They would ask about nightmares. She would say she slept well. They would ask about guilt. She would say the enemy gave her no choice. All of it would be true. None of it would matter. The real question they never asked was the one she couldn't answer. How do you feel about being excellent at killing people? How does it change you to know you can calculate bullet drop at 2,000 meters while men are dying? How do you sleep after becoming death itself for 11 hours? She slept fine. That was the problem. At Murphy's Tavern, Tyler Brennan sat in the same booth where he had humiliated Sarah Kincaid 4 days earlier. The beer in front of him was untouched. Derek, Marcus, and Liam occupied the other seats, equally somber, equally focused on the door. Frank Murphy polished glasses behind the bar, with the patient rhythm of a man who had seen this scene play out 1,000 times in 40 years of serving soldiers. "You boys waiting for someone?" "Yes, sir," Tyler replied. "Specialist Kincaid. We heard she was back on base." "And what makes you think she'll come here?" "She won't. But we will, every night until we get the chance to apologize properly." Henry Walsh, the Korean War veteran, spoke from his corner table. "That girl doesn't strike me as the type who needs apologies. She strikes me as the type who needs to be left alone." "With respect, sir, we disagree." Tyler turned to face the old veteran. "You were right about her. That night you said she had the eyes of someone who'd seen combat. We should have listened." Henry nodded slowly. "What are you boys planning to say when you see her?" "The truth, that we were wrong, that we're sorry, that we want to learn from her." "And you think she'll care about any of that?" Tyler was quiet for a moment. "No, sir, I don't think she cares at all. But we need to say it anyway. Not for her, for us." The tavern door opened. Every head turned. It wasn't Sarah, just another soldier, another person seeking the comfort of beer and brotherhood after another day of service. The 4 Rangers visibly deflated. "She's not coming," Marcus said quietly. "Then we wait longer," Tyler replied, "however long it takes." Derek pulled out his phone and checked the time. "Jason's plane lands at 0800 tomorrow. He'll want to see us first thing. And we'll tell him we're trying to find the person who saved his life so we can apologize for being assholes." Liam traced patterns in the condensation on his beer glass. "You think he knows about Phantom 5 being Sarah?" "The general told me they're keeping her identity classified. Jason knows someone saved him. He doesn't know who." Tyler's jaw tightened, "Which means we can't tell him, even when he asks." "That's going to be hard," Marcus observed. "Harder than watching him die because our pride mattered more than his life?" Tyler's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "No, this is the easy part." At exactly 1600 hours, Sarah stood at attention in Colonel Davis's office, while General Mitchell's face filled the video screen on the wall. The general looked older than he had 3 days ago, the weight of command sitting heavier on his shoulders. "Specialist Kincaid, your after-action report has been reviewed and accepted. Your performance in Helmand Province exceeded all expectations and set new standards for solo operations." The general paused. 97 confirmed enemy kills, 0 friendly casualties, 48 Americans extracted safely. Those numbers speak for themselves. "Thank you, sir. However, I have concerns about the operational parameters. You volunteered to deploy without a spotter, knowing that violates standard protocol. You engaged an enemy force more than 200 strong with no backup and no support. You operated for 11 continuous hours without rest, water, or relief." The general's eyes hardened. "Specialist, that's not bravery, that's a death wish. I need you to tell me honestly, did you expect to survive that mission?" Sarah considered the question with the same analytical precision she applied to ballistic calculations. "Sir, I expected the mission to succeed. My survival was secondary to that objective." "That's not what I asked." "No, sir, I did not expect to survive." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Colonel Davis shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The general's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been pain. "Why?" the general finally asked. "Why volunteer for a suicide mission?" "Because 48 Rangers were dying, and I had the skills to save them. The math was simple, sir. My life versus 48 lives. The equation favored the mission." "You're not an equation specialist, you're a soldier, a person, someone who matters." Sarah met his gaze through the video screen. "With respect, sir, that's not true. I'm a tool, a weapon. When you need someone killed at extreme range, under impossible conditions, you use me. When the mission is complete, you put me back in the box until the next time. That's my value, that's my purpose. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard you say. It's also the truth, sir. The general was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his face filling the screen. Specialist Kincaid, I'm ordering you to undergo full psychological evaluation before you're cleared for duty. Furthermore, I'm placing you on mandatory leave for 30 days. You will not train, you will not deploy, you will not touch a rifle. You will rest, you will process what happened, and you will remember that you're human. Sir, that's not necessary. It's an order, not a request. Colonel Davis will ensure compliance. The general's expression softened slightly. Sarah, you saved 48 lives at the cost of 97 others. That's a victory by any measure. But victories have costs we don't always see immediately. Take the time. Process the mission. Come back when you're ready to be a soldier again, not just a weapon. The screen went dark. Colonel Davis stood and walked to the window, looking out at Fort Campbell's orderly chaos. He's right, you know. I know, sir. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's forgotten how to be anything except Phantom 5. Davis turned to face her. The mission is over, Sarah. You won. Now you need to learn how to live with winning. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to explain that living with winning was easy, compared to living with the in-between times when there was no mission and no purpose, and nothing to focus on except the growing list of people she'd killed in service to her country. But arguing would accomplish nothing except revealing weakness, and weakness was a luxury she couldn't afford. I'll comply with the general's orders, sir. I know you will. But Sarah, I want you to actually try on, not just go through the motions, but actually engage with the process. Davis paused, choosing his next words carefully. There's another reason for the leave. We have a situation developing. Phantom 1 has been deep cover for 3 years now. His last communication was unusual. Sarah's attention sharpened. Marcus Hale, what kind of unusual? He sent a message 3 days ago. 3 words. Ask them why. Davis pulled up a classified file on his tablet. We don't know who them is or what why refers to, but Sarah, Hale trained you. If anyone can interpret what he's trying to tell us, it's you. Where is he? Syria. Operating as a weapons dealer named Qasim. He's been feeding us intelligence on arms shipments to terrorist organizations. Davis met her eyes. But 3 years is a long time to live a lie. We need to know if he's still one of ours. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Her mentor, the man who had taught her everything, might be compromised. When do I leave? Not for 30 days. You're on mandatory rest, remember? Davis's expression softened. Use the time, Sarah. Process Afghanistan. Prepare for whatever Hale's message means. Because when you go to Syria, you might be extracting him, or you might be stopping him. I understand, sir. I hope you do. Dismissed, specialist. Sarah walked out of the headquarters building into the golden autumn afternoon and felt the weight of 30 days of enforced uselessness settle onto her shoulders like a physical burden. 30 days of being invisible without being useful. 30 days of existing in the space between missions where she had no identity and no purpose. And at the end of those 30 days, a mission that might require her to kill the man who had made her into what she was. Her phone buzzed again. Nathan Reeves, persistent as always. Jason Brennan and his Rangers land tomorrow morning. Word is they're planning some kind of ceremony to thank the special operations team that saved them. You going to attend? No. Sarah, they want to say thank you. They can thank the mission planners. I just pulled the trigger. You did a lot more than pull the trigger, and we both know it. Sarah deleted the message without responding and walked toward the logistics warehouse where her cover assignment waited with the patience of paperwork that never diminished and never complained. She could lose herself in inventory reports and requisition forms, in the mundane mathematics of supply chain management that required no moral calculations and resulted in no corpses. But she had barely made it 50 meters before she saw them. 4 Rangers standing at parade rest outside the logistics office. Tyler Brennan, Derek Stone, Marcus Webb, and Liam Cross, all in dress uniforms, all looking like they had been waiting for hours. They saw her at the same moment she saw them and came to attention with the kind of precision that spoke of practice and preparation. Sarah's first instinct was to turn around and walk away. Her second instinct was to render them invisible, the same way she rendered herself invisible, to look through them rather than at them and continue moving as if they didn't exist. But something in their bearing stopped her. Something in the way they stood suggested this wasn't harassment or mockery or anything resembling their previous encounter. This was something else entirely. She approached with measured steps, stopping exactly 6 feet away. Gentlemen, Tyler spoke first, his voice carrying none of the alcohol-fueled bravado from 4 days earlier. Specialist Kincaid, we request permission to speak with you. Regarding what, Sergeant? Regarding our conduct at Murphy's Tavern 4 nights ago, regarding what we said and what we did, regarding the apology we owe you. Sarah looked at each of them in turn, reading their body language the way she read wind and terrain and threat indicators. Genuine remorse in Tyler's eyes, shame in Derek's posture, guilt in Marcus's tight jaw, determination in Liam's bearing. They meant it. Whatever they had come to say, they actually meant it. Apology noted, Sarah said flatly. You're dismissed. With respect, Specialist. We're not finished. Tyler held his ground. We owe you more than words. We owe you truth. The truth is you are drunk and stupid and mean. I've encountered drunk and stupid and mean before. You're dismissed. The truth is we judged a warrior by her cover and found her wanting, Derek interrupted. The truth is we destroyed your property and mocked your knowledge and grabbed your wrist like you were nothing. His voice cracked slightly. The truth is my best friend is alive right now because you volunteered to die for him after we treated you like garbage. Sarah's expression didn't change. Specialist Stone, Captain Brennan's survival was a function of tactical positioning and superior firepower, not personal sacrifice. I performed my assigned mission according to established protocols. Your treatment of me was irrelevant to operational parameters. Stop, Tyler said quietly. Please, stop pretending this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Sergeant. Your opinion of me, your remorse, your guilt, none of it matters. The mission matters. The Rangers I saved matter, you don't. The words hit like physical blows. Tyler actually flinched, but he didn't back down. You're right, he said simply. We don't matter. Not compared to what you did. Not compared to the 48 lives you saved. But Specialist, whether it matters to you or not, we need to say this. We need you to hear it. Sarah looked at her watch with deliberate rudeness. You have 2 minutes. Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, the kind used for military coins and medals. He opened it to reveal a field manual, new and pristine, the exact replacement for the one Liam had destroyed. First, restitution for property damage. The manual cost $87. We paid $870. That's excessive. That's the point. Tyler set the box on the ground between them. Second, acknowledgement of our failure. We failed as Rangers. We failed as soldiers. We failed as men. We saw someone reading tactical manuals and assumed she didn't understand them. We saw someone quiet and assumed she was weak. We saw someone different and assumed she was less. Derek stepped forward in third, gratitude. My best friend's brother is Captain Jason Brennan. You saved his life. You saved 47 other Rangers. You did it alone against impossible odds after we humiliated you. His voice was steady despite the emotion. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but thank you. Marcus spoke next. Fourth, commitment. We spent 4 days studying everything we could find about the Phantom program. Most of it's classified, but we found enough to understand what you are, what you do, the sacrifices you make while staying invisible. He straightened. We want to learn. We want to become worthy of serving alongside warriors like you. Liam, the youngest, finished. Fifth, accountability. We can't undo what we did. We can't take back the words or the mockery or the destroyed manual. All we can do is acknowledge it, own it, and promise to be better. So that's what we're doing. We were wrong, we're sorry, and we'll spend the rest of our careers proving we learned the lesson. Sarah looked at the 4 men standing before her, these Rangers who had started as bullies and were trying to transform into something better. The apology was complete, thorough, and clearly rehearsed. They meant every word. None of it changed anything. Your apology is noted and accepted, Sarah said in the same flat tone. Your commitment to self-improvement is commendable. Your gratitude for operational success is appreciated. Is there anything else? Tyler's shoulders sagged slightly. He had expected something more, hoped for something different. No, Specialist, that's all. Then you're dismissed. But as they started to turn away, Sarah spoke again. Sergeant Brennan, Tyler turned back. Yes? Your brother arrives tomorrow morning at 0800. He'll want to see you first. Make sure you're there. Tyler's eyes widened. How did you know that? I read the flight manifest. It's my job. Sarah's expression remained neutral. When you see him, tell him the Rangers he commanded in Helmand fought with honor. They held their position against impossible odds and never quit. Tell him he should be proud of them. I will. Tyler hesitated. Specialist, can I ask you something? You can ask. When you were in Afghanistan, when you were fighting to save my brother and his Rangers, did you know we had humiliated you? Did you remember what we'd done? Sarah looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. I remembered, Sergeant. Every word, every insult, the beer on my manual, your hand on my wrist. I remembered all of it. Then why? Why save them after what we did? Because the mission mattered more than my feelings. Because 48 Americans deserved to come home regardless of whether their brothers had earned that mercy. Because that's what warriors do, Sergeant Brennan. We protect, even when it hurts, even when the people we're protecting don't deserve it, even when no one will ever know our names. Sarah picked up the wooden box with the replacement manual. Thank you for this. The gesture is appreciated. Specialist Kincaid, Liam called out as she started to walk away. If we apply for the Phantom program, will you train us? Sarah stopped, but didn't turn around. The Phantom program doesn't take applications, Private Cross. The Phantom program finds you, and if it does, I'll train whoever they send me. Whether that includes you depends on whether you're worthy. How do we become worthy? By being the warriors you should have been 4 days ago. By protecting instead of posturing. By serving instead of showing off. By remembering that every supply clerk, every motor pool mechanic, every cook, and every admin specialist might be more than they appear, and treating them accordingly. Sarah walked away without another word, leaving 4 Rangers standing at attention in the fading light. Inside the logistics warehouse, she set the wooden box on her desk and opened it. The field manual was indeed an exact replacement, the same edition, the same technical specifications. But tucked inside the front cover was something else, a challenge coin. On one side, it showed a ghost figure overlaying a crosshair with the number 48 below. On the reverse, 4 names, Tyler Brennan, Derek Stone, Marcus Webb, Liam Cross. And below the names, 3 words in small letters. We will earn this. Sarah studied the coin for a long moment, then locked it in her desk drawer and began processing the mountain of paperwork that had accumulated during her 3-day absence. Requisition forms, inventory reports, equipment transfers, the invisible bureaucracy that kept an army running. By the time she finished, it was after midnight. The warehouse was empty except for her and the endless rows of supplies that needed counting and cataloging and moving from one place to another. She could lose herself in this work, in the mundane mathematics that required no moral calculations. But her phone buzzed one more time. Colonel Davis. My office, 0700 tomorrow. Bring your dress uniform. Sarah stared at the message. Dress uniform meant ceremony. Ceremony meant visibility. Visibility was the opposite of everything the Phantom program represented. She texted back, Sir, I'm on mandatory leave, general's orders. The response came immediately. This isn't optional. 0700, don't be late. At 0700 the next morning, Sarah stood in Colonel Davis's office wearing her dress uniform and wondering what fresh hell awaited. The colonel sat behind his desk with an expression that mixed satisfaction and concern. Specialist Kincaid, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. You will not discuss it with anyone without explicit authorization, understood? Yes, sir. The operation in Helmand Province, the ambush of Captain Brennan's Rangers, the intelligence failure that led to their encirclement. Davis leaned forward. It wasn't an intelligence failure, it was a test. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Sir, we've been tracking Sergeant Tyler Brennan's team for 6 months. They have the skills for the Phantom program. High marksmanship scores, excellent tactical knowledge, strong combat records. But skills aren't enough. We needed to know their character. You set up the encounter at Murphy's Tavern. No, that was genuine happenstance, but we were watching, waiting to see how they'd respond to someone and they perceived as weaker. When they humiliated you, we learned what we needed to know about their current character. When you responded with professional grace despite their harassment, we learned what we needed to know about yours. And the ambush in Afghanistan? That was real. 48 Rangers genuinely trapped, genuinely dying. But the decision to send you alone, without a spotter, knowing it was a suicide mission, that was the second part of the test. We needed to know if you would sacrifice yourself for the men who had wronged you. If you would put mission over ego even when ego had been deliberately damaged. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Sir, you risked 48 American lives to test my character? We risked 48 American lives because the intelligence was legitimate and the threat was real. But we also knew that if anyone could save them, it was you. The test wasn't whether you could complete the mission. The test was whether you would volunteer knowing you might not survive. Davis's expression softened. You passed, Sarah, with distinction. And the 4 Rangers? They failed the first test by humiliating you, but they're passing the second test right now. Every day, they show up at the logistics office looking for you. Every night, they sit in Murphy's Tavern, waiting for a chance to apologize. Every hour, they spend studying to become better warriors. That's growth. That's the kind of character development we need for the Phantom program. You're going to recruit them. We already have. The question is whether you'll train them. Sarah was silent for a long moment, processing the revelation that her humiliation had been observed. that her mission had been partially a test, that the four men who had mocked her were being groomed to become her students. I don't have a choice, do I, sir? You always have a choice, specialist, but the general believes you're the right person to train them. You've demonstrated the values we need them to learn. Quiet professionalism, mission over ego, protection over pride. Davis stood. What do you say? When do we start? Tonight. Murphy's Tavern, 2100 hours. They'll be there waiting. You'll walk in, you'll sit at their table, and you'll begin their education. And what exactly am I teaching them, sir? How to be invisible. How to be deadly. How to sacrifice everything for people who will never know their names. Davis handed her a folder marked with classification stamps. Welcome to the Phantom Program Training Cadre, Specialist Kincaid. Try not to break them too badly. That evening at 2100 hours, Sarah Kincaid walked into Murphy's Tavern wearing civilian clothes and carrying the weight of new responsibility. The four Rangers sat in their usual booth, nursing beers they weren't drinking, watching the door with the intensity of soldiers on overwatch. When Sarah entered, they immediately stood. She walked directly to their table and sat down without invitation. Gentlemen, we need to talk about your futures. Tyler's eyes widened. You're here. You actually came. I'm here because I was ordered to be here. You're here because you chose to be here. Those are different things, but they lead to the same place. Sarah folded her hands on the table. You want to join the Phantom program? It wasn't a question. Derek nodded, more than anything. Then understand what that means. It means 18 months of training that will push you beyond every limit you think you have. It means learning to be invisible in plain sight, to live a cover so completely that it becomes your reality. It means watching Rangers like you were mock people like you'll become and never breaking character. It means killing at ranges you can't currently imagine, in conditions you can't currently comprehend, for reasons you'll never be able to discuss. Marcus leaned forward. We understand. No, you don't, but you will. Sarah pulled out 4 envelopes from her jacket and placed them on the table. Inside these envelopes are your training orders. Report to the address listed at 0600 tomorrow. Bring nothing but yourselves. Everything you need will be provided. Everything you currently are will be stripped away. Liam picked up his envelope with trembling hands. Who will we become? Ghosts, shadows. The quiet professionals who protect America from threats most people never know exist. Sarah stood. You'll become invisible, deadly, essential, and utterly alone. Will you be training us? Tyler asked. For the first 6 months, yes. After that, you'll train separately, then together, then separately again. If you survive and succeed, you'll receive your Phantom designation. If you fail, you'll return to your units with no memory of the program. They'll erase our memories. Chemically, permanently. The Phantom program doesn't tolerate failures who know its secrets. The 4 Rangers exchanged glances. This was real. This was happening. This was the chance they had been seeking, and the risk was total. I'm in, Tyler said. Me too, Derek added. Same, Marcus confirmed. Count me in, Liam finished. Sarah nodded once. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning. Don't be late. Phantom candidates who can't arrive on time don't become phantoms. They become cautionary tales. She turned to leave, but Tyler called out. Specialist Kincaid, one question. What? When we complete training, when we become phantoms, will we be as good as you? Sarah looked at him with eyes that had killed 97 men in 11 hours. No, Sergeant Brennan, you won't be as good as me. You'll be better, because you'll have something I didn't have. What's that? You'll have me teaching you. I had to learn everything the hard way. You get to learn from my mistakes. Sarah's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Don't waste the advantage. She walked out into the Kentucky night, leaving 4 Rangers holding envelopes that would change their lives forever. Frank Murphy approached their table with fresh beers. Well, boys, looks like you got what you wanted. We got the chance, Tyler corrected. Now we have to prove we can handle it. Henry Walsh raised his glass from across the room. To the ghosts, may they walk in shadows and return in honor. The 4 Rangers raised their glasses in response, drinking to a future they couldn't yet imagine and a past they were desperate to redeem. 6 months later, a different Fort Campbell existed for 4 men who were learning to be invisible. They worked in motor pools and supply depots and admin offices, performing their cover assignments with the same dedication they had once reserved for Ranger operations. But in the hours between midnight and dawn, they trained. Sarah Kincaid taught them how to calculate windage at 2,000 meters, how to read terrain like a book written in shadows and light, how to move through populated areas without being remembered, how to kill without conscience and live without recognition. They were adequate students, not exceptional, not yet, but adequate. On a cold February morning, Sarah stood on a rifle range with Tyler Brennan, watching him attempt a shot she had made routine. 1,500 meters, crosswind, uphill angle. He had missed 3 times. You're overthinking it, she said quietly. I'm calculating every variable you taught me. That's the problem. Stop calculating. Start knowing. The rifle is an extension of your will. The target is already dead. You're just informing them of the fact. Tyler settled behind the rifle again, forcing himself to relax, to trust his training. He exhaled slowly, found the pause between heartbeats, and squeezed the trigger. The target pinged, hit. Better, Sarah acknowledged. Do it again. They trained for another hour before Sarah called a halt. Tyler packed his gear with the kind of care she had beaten into him over 6 months of relentless instruction. Specialist Kincaid, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. The night in Afghanistan, when you were fighting to save my brother, what were you thinking? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I was thinking about bullet drop compensation at extreme range. I was thinking about wind patterns in mountain valleys. I was thinking about ammunition conservation and target prioritization. That's it? Nothing else? What else should there have been, Sergeant? I don't know. Fear, anger, something human? Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. Being human is a luxury, Tyler. In combat, you can't afford luxuries. You can only afford to win. That sounds lonely. It is. Sarah slung her rifle across her back. But it's also effective. And in the Phantom program, effective matters more than comfortable. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and her expression went completely neutral. Tyler had learned to read that look. It meant a mission. You're deploying it, he said. In 4 hours. Where? Syria. Chemical plant. American contractors trapped. Sarah started walking toward the armory. While I'm gone, you're in charge of the other 3. Keep them training. Keep them sharp. I'll be back in 72 hours if everything goes well. And if it doesn't, then Nathan Reeves will finish your training. Sarah paused at the door. Don't disappoint me by dying stupid while I'm gone. Tyler watched her disappear into the building where her real gear waited, the tools of her invisible war. 6 months ago, he had mocked this woman, had poured beer on her manual, had grabbed her wrist like she was nothing. Now he would die for the chance to become half the warrior she already was. At the armory, Sarah found Colonel Davis waiting with mission brief and authorization codes. Syria, American contractors trapped at a chemical plant, 57 hostiles, local military complications, extraction required in 12 hours. Spotter? Nathan will meet you in country. Good. Sarah began loading her kit. Sir Marcus Hale, is he still in Syria? He is. Same city, actually. Different sector. Davis's expression grew serious. Sarah, if you encounter Hale during this mission, be careful. 3 years undercover can change a person. Make them into their cover. Make them forget which side they're really on. Sarah stared at the mission brief, her mind already calculating the implications. Her mentor was in the same operational theater. The man who had taught her to be Phantom 5 might need extraction or elimination. I'll complete my mission first, sir. Then I'll find him. That's not your mission. Your mission is the contractors. Then I'll complete my mission and find him. Sarah finished loading her kit. Because if Hale is in trouble, I'm the one who needs to get him out or finish what he started. The C-17 waited on the runway, engines already spinning up. Sarah walked toward it with her rifle and her gear and the growing certainty that this mission was going to be more complicated than the brief suggested. Behind her, Fort Campbell continued its routine. Soldiers trained, rangers planned. 4 candidates learned to be invisible. And somewhere in the Syrian desert, a ghost who had been invisible for 3 years waited for someone to ask the right question. Sarah climbed into the aircraft and settled into the familiar discomfort of military transport. The mission was clear, the stakes were high, the enemy was numerous. But the real question wasn't about the contractors or the hostiles or the 12-hour deadline. The real question was what Marcus Hale had discovered in 3 years of living a lie, and whether the answer would save them or kill them all. The aircraft lifted off into the gathering dark, carrying death toward those who threatened American lives, carrying hope toward those who had given up hoping, carrying one quiet woman who had learned that sometimes the hardest missions weren't the ones where you fought enemies. They were the ones where you had to save the people who taught you how to fight. The war in the shadows never ended, but neither did the ghosts who fought it. And Sarah Kincaid was just getting started. This story hits different because it's about something we all understand. Respect isn't given by rank or job title. It's earned through action. Sarah Kincaid never needed anyone to know her name. She just needed those 48 Rangers to come home alive. That's the warrior mindset so many of you live by. Question for the veterans here. Have you ever served alongside someone whose real capabilities surprised you? Someone who was more than their MOS suggested? Share your stories below. This community honors the quiet professionals. New subscribers, check out our playlist for more untold stories like this.